Who could ever defy a founding father in death? Not every architect of the United States was buried according to his specifications. John Adams signed 2 of the 4 founding documents of the United States, served as the second president, and had a son who became president. With impeccable timing, Adams died at age 90 on July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the date traditionally considered the signing of the Declaration of Independence. His last words reportedly were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." The news was even slower to arrive to Adams' son, John Quincy Adams, who was president at the time. The elder Adams had reportedly been dead 5 days before his son even learned that he was unwell, let alone that he died. But by that point, he'd already been laid to rest. The Columbia Sentinel reported on Adams' death at the time, and while his son might not have been there, it seemed like most of the people of Quincy, Massachusetts were. He was ultimately entombed in a crypt at the United First Parish Church. His wife Abigail, son John Quincy, and daughter-in-law Louisa would eventually join him there. Benjamin Franklin was never a president, but he wasn't important enough to get his face on the $100 bill.
Well, let's keep it 100.
After an exciting and eventful life, Franklin became extremely ill in 1790 from emphysema, which made breathing almost impossible. He died on April 17th at the age of 84. 4 days later, Philadelphia saw the largest funeral in its history, with 20,000 people estimated to have attended out of just a population of 28,000. Franklin was laid to rest in the same city in Christ Church Burial Ground, which already held the bodies of his wife, Deborah Reed, who preceded her husband by 15 years, and their son Francis, who had died at just 4 years old. Always a humorist, Franklin had written his own epitaph as a joke way back in 1728. The body of B. Franklin printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out, and script of its lettering and gilding lies here, food for worms. But the work shall not be wholly lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more, in a new and more perfect edition, corrected and amended by the author. This fitting epitaph can now be found on a plaque near Franklin's final resting place. Tourists are known for throwing pennies on his grave for good luck. Alexander Hamilton might have only signed 1 of the 4 founding documents of the United States, but his writing and his time as the first Secretary of the Treasury definitely makes him one of the most important founding fathers. And thanks to a 1990s milk commercial and a certain 21st century musical, he's probably one of the most well-known nowadays.
Who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel?
Hamilton was killed in 1804 in a duel with then Vice President Aaron Burr. This meant his death was unlike that of most other founding fathers, coming suddenly and unexpectedly. His precise year of birth is debated, but he was in his late 40s when he was killed. Hamilton's funeral took place in New York City on July 14, 1804, and the procession was lengthy. The New York Evening Post reported, "The streets were lined with people, doors and windows were filled, principally with weeping females, and even the housetops were covered with spectators who came from all parts to behold the melancholy procession." Hamilton was interred at Trinity Church in New York City, and his grave was eventually marked by a massive monument. His wife would join him there after she outlived him by 50 years, with her grave marked only by a plain stone. John Jay was a force to be reckoned with. The CIA recognizes him as the first national-level American counterintelligence chief, and he was also the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He died in 1829 at the age of 83. According to the Journal of American Revolution, Jay is the only founding father buried in a private family cemetery, which is located in Rye, New York. It's reportedly unknown why exactly the Jay family decided to keep the cemetery private. The burial ground's official website emphasizes that it's not open to the public, and you can only be buried there if you can prove that you're a direct descendant of the founding father. But maybe this is exactly how Jay himself wanted it. As his biographer Walter Starr has noted, in the end, he's more worried about America than he is about John Jay. It's still a mind-blowing fact that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
I must say, this Declaration of Independence is coming along quite nicely.
And people were no less amazed at the time that it happened. A statement from the Secretary of War noted, "A coincidence of circumstances so wonderful gives confidence to the belief that the patriotic efforts of these illustrious men were heaven-directed, and furnishes a new seal to the hope that the prosperity of these states is under the special protection of a kind of providence." Jefferson had specific instructions for his gravesites, which included the exact wording of his epitaph. He wanted only 3 of his many achievements in life to be mentioned: that he wrote both the Declaration of Independence and the Statute of Virginia for religious freedom, and that he founded the University of Virginia. You might notice that this list does not include the fact that he was the 3rd president of the United States. Jefferson's funeral was held the day after he died, July 5, 1826. He was buried in the graveyard of his estate Monticello in Virginia, with only a few dozen people attending the simple service. He even asked that his monument be made of cheap stone so that people wouldn't be tempted to take it. James Madison was the fourth president of the United States, but his biggest accomplishment was probably drafting the Constitution. He also contributed to the Federalist Papers, led the country through the War of 1812, and served on the board of the University of Virginia. Madison was quite long-lived, even by modern standards, as he made it to 85 years old. He outlived all the other founding fathers when he died on June 28, 1836, after being bedbound for 6 months. He was buried in the family cemetery at Montpelier, his estate in Virginia. However, despite his importance to the country, his grave was not marked at the time, and it would in fact be 21 years before a monument was added to mark the spot. George Washington wasn't exactly a young man when he died, although he wasn't that old. His death at 67 in 1799 happened so suddenly that the country had no time to mentally prepare for the loss of the first president, or literally prepare for a funeral. His cause of death was noted at the time as an inflammatory sore throat, which historians now think was probably pneumonia or a strep infection. Before he died, Washington left instructions for what to do with his body at his Mount Vernon plantation in Virginia, as he wrote, "The family vault at Mount Vernon requiring repairs and being improperly situated besides, I desire that a new one of brick and upon a larger scale may be built at the foot of what is commonly called the vineyard enclosure." Unfortunately, those repairs didn't happen because politicians planned to ignore his wishes and bury Washington in the Capitol. Until then, they just kept his remains in the rundown crypt, which meant it was easy for a disgruntled ex-employee of Mount Vernon to break in and attempt to steal Washington's skull, though he ended up with the skull of a different Washington relative. After the theft, a new tomb was finally constructed, and Washington got his wish to be interred there.
God bless George Washington, President of the United States!
Samuel Adams signed one more founding document than even his second cousin John Adams, as he put his name on all but the Constitution. He also served as governor of Massachusetts and ran for various other offices. By the time he reached his 80s, he knew that his time was limited. According to the book Sam Adams, the father of American independence, he was failing physically but was still there mentally. So when he got his family together and told them very specifically that he did not want a big funeral and insisted on a plain coffin, they surely knew he was serious. But once he died on October 2, 1803, his wishes went out the window. Ideas thrown around for Adams' funeral included a procession accompanying the coffin, perhaps made up of school children or survivors of the Battle of Lexington. In the end, the funeral was even bigger than that, as it became a parade to Boston's Granary Burying Ground. There was a large procession that included a bunch of politicians. Perhaps feeling guilty that they ignored what he wanted, his loved ones did end up burying him in a simple coffin, although other people weren't very happy about that. In fact, 54 years later, it was such a sticking point for his admirers that they dug him up and put him in a much nicer coffin before re-interring his body. John Hancock was able to sign his name so large on the Declaration of Independence because at the time, he was the president of the Continental Congress. He would later go on to serve as the governor of Massachusetts. However, he also missed out on some big gigs, including the command of the Continental Army and the first American vice presidency. Towards the end of his life, Hancock suffered from gout that was so extreme that he had to be carried around. But his death reportedly still came as a shock to his loved ones. He passed away October 8, 1793 at the age of 56. He left instructions for a simple funeral, although that didn't happen. Thousands of people reportedly came to pay their respects before he was buried. On the day of his funeral, the church bells in Boston tolled for an hour straight. He was buried at the Granary Burying Ground alongside many other famous patriots. If you know one thing about Patrick Henry, it's probably that he said, "Give me liberty or give me death."
Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Death, please. Next!
And that wasn't the only impressive thing he said in his time. According to the Historical Marker database, Henry was the most famous orator of his day. His silver tongue helped him become a successful lawyer, and he also served as governor of Virginia. On top of that, his issues with the U.S. Constitution led to the inclusion of the Bill of Rights. Towards the end of his life, Henry was offered some significant positions, but he kept turning them down, including a seat in the Senate, the Chief Justiceship of the Supreme Court, and Ambassador of France. He might not have had time for anything so time-consuming considering he fathered a whopping 17 children. He died on June 6, 1799 at the age of 63. He was buried on the estate he purchased only 5 years before in Red Hill, Virginia. It's a small family graveyard, and his second wife is buried next to him. His loved ones clearly knew that his name would go down in history, as his gravestone is etched with the simple but extremely grand pronouncement, "His fame, his best epitaph." Roger Sherman might not be the most famous founding father, but he was the only person to sign all 4 of the founding documents: the Continental Association, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. Besides signing all these important documents, Sherman was instrumental in coming up with the Great Compromise, which invented the idea of 2 houses in Congress. This is still the same system that American government has today, in which one house has proportional representation based on the state's populations, and in the other house, all states have 2 representatives. This made both big and little states happy, or at least happy enough. Sherman went on to serve in both houses of Congress and as the treasurer of Yale College. Sherman died on July 23, 1793 at the age of 72, and he was buried at the Grove Street Cemetery in New Haven, Connecticut. His epitaph tries to fit in seemingly all of his achievements, as it runs to nearly 200 words.